Welcome to Core Concept HQ, where big ideas are simplified.
And today, we are diving deep into a concept that really challenges the relentless engine of modern capitalism.
Yeah, it does.
We're talking about rejecting that, deeply ingrained mantra that bigger is always better.
And that the only real metric for success in business is just endless aggressive growth.
Exactly.
That's right. Our mission today is a deep dive into the philosophy of the company of one, a strategy for building a business that's designed to thrive by intentionally resisting that constant pressure to scale.
We're summarizing this core idea that being better at what you do and for who you do it is just profoundly preferable to chasing exponential size.
And it's not just a lifestyle choice, right? This is a radical business model in a world that is completely obsessed with scale and venture capital and, market conquest.
A company of one, or a K1 as we'll call it, is fundamentally a business often founded and run by a single person or maybe a very small team that actually questions the need for growth.
And stay small on purpose.
On purpose, that's the key. This intentional decision is strategic. It's all about maximizing profitability, control, and personal autonomy, while minimizing the massive, complex overhead that scaling just inevitably demands.
I think it's crucial right at the outset to distinguish a CO1 from other small operations that might look similar on the surface. We aren't just talking about, your typical neighborhood small business, are we?
Correct. That's a great point. When most people think of a traditional small business like a local bakery or a consultancy with 5 employees, that business, while it starts small, is generally striving for peak profitability through eventual expansion.
They want to hire more staff, open a second location.
Maybe franchise,
Yeah.
conquer the local market share. Growth is seen as the inevitable, necessary end game, even if it comes at the cost of the owner's time.
And it's definitely not just simple freelancing, which is where a lot of people start when they leave the corporate world. I mean, I know countless freelancers, writers, coders, designers who are constantly trading their time directly for money. If they take a vacation, the cash flow just stops. They are stuck on that effort for income treadmill.
Exactly. And freelancing is a crucial first step toward independence, but it's still fundamentally exchanging 1 hour of your labor for 1 unit of currency. The sole one is different because the owner understands the power of technology and scalable systems to decouple revenue from time spent.
Okay, so they might create a digital product or automate client onboarding.
Or build a robust educational course. This infrastructure lets them be self-reliant and gain ultimate control over their career path. They're building a resilient wall around themselves, not just a fragile platform.
We have to start with the origin story for this idea because it really serves as the perfect illustration of how forced simplification can lead to profound business clarity.
Yeah, this is a great story.
So back in 2010, the author finds himself and his wife, Lisa, driving this tiny cube van with everything they owned toward a ferry terminal. They had sold nearly everything, including their small but expensive glass condo in downtown Vancouver, to make a massive life change.
They were heading toward Tofino, which is billed as life on the edge on Vancouver Island. And if you look at it on a map, it's literally at the end of the road. It's known for its isolation and its small, dedicated community.
I mean, fewer than 2,000 people live there.
Right. Mostly dedicated surfers and people who are just genuinely happy living without the constant pressure of urban complexity. So for someone working entirely online as a digital designer for tech giants like Mercedes-Benz and Microsoft, moving there was a huge deal.
He was trading a hyper-connected, high-speed tech life for a truly dreadful internet connection. It was a deliberate psychological experiment.
He was hell-bent on leaving the constant, exhausting push to scale his already successful business into something bigger and just escaping the relentless stimulus and stress of city life.
But the truly revolutionary insight came directly from that change in location and the forced reduction of material possessions. Living in the woods on an isolated island, it forces you to confront your own thoughts in a way city life often doesn't allow.
A difficult task for many of us, as research suggests. I mean, there was that famous University of Virginia study that found people would actually prefer to receive mild electric shocks than simply be alone with their thoughts for a short period.
Wow.
It speaks volumes about the level of stress and the desperate need for distraction that modern life cultivates.
It's an overwhelming cycle. By scaling down his physical life, getting rid of the clutter, and selling the things that demanded his time and attention, he inadvertently started achieving this crucial mental clarity. He was essentially performing an inbox zero for his brain.
And this newfound space allowed him to finally see what was genuinely necessary for his day-to-day business, what was purely habit, and what was just, well, vanity.
And that precisely was the aha moment.
Yes.
He realized he had unconsciously been building a resilient business driven by autonomy, enjoyment, and profitability for nearly 20 years by resisting the typical growth mandates. He'd been building a company of one all along, but he needed to step away from the noise to recognize the strategy he was already using.
And if we had to summarize this entire C1 model into a playbook, it comes down to three deceptively simple, actionable rules. They are start small, define growth, and keep learning.
Simple rules.
And these rules are the roadmap that allows you to shift your focus from accumulation to optimization.
Okay, let's unpack this core philosophy further, starting with our first section, questioning the growth mandate. If the rules are so simple, why is that first step always the hardest? Rewiring our brains to accept that endless growth might actually be a trap. Why do we feel that powerful cultural pull toward more?
Well, it's because the assumption that growth is good is deeply embedded in every single facet of our culture, especially in traditional business. In the corporate world, there's this often unquestioned dogma that growth must be unlimited and is fundamentally required for success and for satisfying shareholders.
Right. If your quarter-over-quarter growth slows, the market panics. Regardless of how profitable or stable you are, the mandate is always, always expand.
And this isn't just a corporate fiduciary duty. Consumer culture reinforces it constantly. We are just barraged with advertising, selling us the dream of more. Bigger houses, faster cars, closets bursting with stuff that often ends up in paid storage lockers.
But the crushing reality is that more too often equates to more stress, more debt, and more responsibilities, both in our personal finances and in our business operations.
That's why the foundational, absolutely crucial step for a SWIL1 is defining enough. This one act provides the practical, psychological, and financial guardrails you need to resist the constant societal and industrial pressure to perpetually scale.
Without defining enough, you're just perpetually chasing an undefined moving target.
You are.
But I have to ask, isn't defining enough inherently risky? I mean, if you stop working, what if an unexpected cost comes up? A roof repair, a large medical bill? Isn't continuous growth, or at least continuous accumulation, inherently safer?
That's a great critical question. And it forces us to look at the stability that's inherent in the Co-1 model. Because a Co-1 operates with high profitability and extremely low overhead. Remember, they scale systems, not staff. Their margins are often far higher than a traditional firm.
They're stable, not fragile.
Exactly. Look at the practical example from the source material. The accountant friend in Tofino.
Gray. He was out surfing with the author in August, and he was just stoked because he had already made enough profit to cover his entire cost of living, his investments, and his savings goals, his enough amount for the entire year.
Precisely. And what did he do when he hit that number? He calculated his buffer, made sure his future needs were met, stopped accepting new clients, closed his laptop, and went rock climbing and surfing for the rest of the year.
He defined his success not in dollars accumulated, but in time reclaimed.
That's the key. And his insight was pivotal in illustrating the So1 philosophy. If you were to grow his accounting business in the traditional way, hiring 3 new employees, opening an office downtown, investing in a complex CRM system, his enough number would just swell dramatically.
Just to manage the complexity and staff salaries and rent?
Right. And that growth would directly reduce his time for rock climbing or surfing, which are the very activities that define his desired lifestyle. His focus was on being better at accounting for his 15 select clients, not growing bigger.
This trade-off is the essence of the So1 mindset. Growth should serve the life you want, not the other way around.
If growth undermines your autonomy or reduces the quality of your output, it's detrimental. Another excellent real-world example of this principle is Tom Fishburne, who's internationally known as the Marketunist.
Tom quit a seemingly great career as VP of marketing at a large consumer foods company because his true passion was drawing cartoons. He was making good money, but he realized he was spending his life managing others instead of creating.
And he didn't quit impulsively. He meticulously planned, built up a safe runway of clients who purchased his syndicated content, and he saved aggressively before he submitted his resignation.
And in the years since, he's consistently made 2 to 3 times more income than he did as a corporate executive. But what's critical is how he achieved this financial success.
He didn't grow a cartoon agency. His company, Marketoon, is still primarily just him and his wife, with specific specialized contractors brought in only for certain projects.
That focus on avoiding management overhead is the key. If he had pursued the agency model, he would have had to manage teams of cartoonists, handle HR issues, and dedicate his time to infrastructure instead of drawing and spending time with his family in their backyard studio.
That growth would have directly violated the core values that led him to quit his VP role in the first place. Not all growth is smart or logical or aligned with your purpose.
And this resistance to blind growth also acts as a profound defense against systemic fragility, especially when we look at the high-stakes startup world. We see research confirming that many fast-growing companies that rely on massive venture capital or VC injections fail, or undergo massive layoffs, or get sold below market value just to satisfy investors' thirst for an exit.
The core issue is that they are growing based on anticipated revenue, or even worse, based on external pressure. Paul Graham of Y Combinator points out that VCs often invest the amount their own portfolio requires to see an exponential return, not necessarily the actual amount the startup needs to achieve sustainable profit.
So it turns businesses into these bloated, fragile organizations that are reliant on constant external funding.
And this kind of growth, fueled by external expectations rather than current, solid, profitable cash flow, it's extremely fragile. The term for this is burn rate. They're growing faster than their revenue and relying on VC money to burn through costs until they achieve critical mass.
A great example of this is Buffer, this social media scheduling tool. They were once a darling of the startup community.
They got caught up in this exact phenomenon. They secured significant funding and started a massive hiring frenzy to satisfy the extremely high revenue and employee targets that their investors expected to see to justify the valuation.
So they rapidly hired more people than their actual current revenue could sustain.
They were building an organization based on projected future targets. When reality set in, they realized their assumption that they could hire based on potential instead of current solid profit was unsustainable and illogical.
This forced them to execute a painful 11% layoff, reducing their staff back down to a profitable, manageable number. The remaining leadership then explicitly prioritized slower, profit-based, sustainable growth over the typical high-stakes startup growth game.
The takeaway here is stark for anyone starting a business. When growth is the primary, unquestioned goal, it inevitably introduces enormous risk and systemic fragility.
But when profit, stability, and operational betterment are the primary goals, growth becomes a healthy, sustainable result that you can control rather than a master you must constantly serve.
That sets the philosophical stage. Let's move into section 2 and look at the defining characteristics of a successful company of one. Our sources highlight 3 key traits necessary for this model: resilience, autonomy, and speed. Let's start with resilience.
Okay, resilience.
Resilience is a fundamental requirement for the C1 because operating outside the traditional corporate security blanket exposes you to more volatility. We define resilience as the capacity and fortitude to recover quickly from difficulties, whether that's a sudden shift in the market, being fired, or having to rapidly adapt to a new technology.
Dean Becker, who founded Adaptive Learning Systems, spent decades studying business success and found that a person's level of resilience determines their success in business far more than their education, training, or professional experience.
That's a powerful finding, especially since we often assume experience is the ultimate predictor of success. And critically, resilience is a learned trait. It's not a genetic advantage. It's a muscle you develop.
And the first step toward developing that learned resilience is the acceptance of reality. This is the act of abandoning wishful thinking, that common idea that if only this obstacle changed, I could finally thrive.
Resilient people operate with a down-to-earth view. Much of what happens in life, including market fluctuations or competitors' actions, is not entirely within our immediate control.
The author's personal example of this is such a good micro lesson. While trying to work on a tight deadline, his neighbor started using a deafening chainsaw right outside his window.
Right, and instead of stopping work or engaging in wishful thinking about a quiet life or getting angry, he simply accepted the noise as a reality he couldn't change, closed his window, turned on some loud music to drown it out, and got back to work.
He adapted instantly rather than stopping.
That small, practical decision, accepting reality and adapting immediately, is the hallmark of resilience. It's also why the sources mention that dark humor is often encouraged among highly stressed professionals like firefighters and first responders as a coping mechanism.
That makes sense.
They routinely see the worst day of someone's life, and their humor isn't meant to make light of tragic situations, but rather to add a psychological buffer, helping them accept that harsh reality, process it, and sustain their resilience in these essential high-trauma work environments.
That ability to process and move forward is essential when you have limited resources. Now, resilience often intertwines with the pursuit of autonomy. The search for control often drives people toward the So One model. We see a powerful, painful anecdote in the story of Danielle Laporte.
Danielle Laporte, a best-selling author and self-made entrepreneur, initially pursued the traditional growth path. She believed, like many do, that exponential growth was required to fulfill her vision. So she took $400,000 in funding from private investors.
But that funding came with strings attached.
Big strings. A critical provision was that she was required to hire a wunderkind CEO to professionalize and scale the business, essentially ceding operational control.
And what happened? Just 6 months later, the investors and the very CEO she had hired fired her from her own company.
That was the moment of clarity, forged in massive professional pain. She realized funding never just means money. It means external opinions about her business, her strategy, and her life. Her resilience meant immediately regrouping, abandoning the expensive infrastructure, and returning to her path as a true company of one, free from external control.
She found that the cost of that capital, the loss of autonomy, was far too high.
It was.
So autonomy becomes the prime motivator for Suwons, the freedom to choose when, where, and how you work. But that freedom isn't cheap or easy. The source material emphasizes that autonomy requires a master level of skill. Autonomy without competence is described as a recipe for disaster. Why is it so dangerous without mastery?
Because if you're not highly competent, you are still essentially a contractor, relying on others to define the scope and value of your work. You have to possess a well-developed, in-demand niche skill set before you can realistically expect to lead projects, be selective about clients, or command premium rates.
It's your skill that creates the leverage.
Yes. As your expertise grows, you gain the power to turn down work that doesn't align with your values or financial goals and focus entirely on the work you love. That's the definition of earned autonomy.
A great example of someone prioritizing that control and competence is Saul Orwell of Examine.com, a major health and nutrition resource. His profitable company makes 7 figures annually, but he has consistently refused venture capital because he doesn't want to relinquish a single percentage of control.
To him, success is making a great living without sacrificing his desired lifestyle. He loves having the freedom to take long midday breaks for dog walks or attend hour-long dance classes on a Wednesday afternoon if he chooses.
That level of control is only possible because he's the majority owner, the intellectual property creator, and answers only to his paying customers, not to investors demanding endless growth that would steal his time.
The third essential trait is speed and simplicity. For a Co-1, speed isn't about working frantically or burning the midnight oil. It's about operational efficiency and, more importantly, the ability to pivot quickly because they lack the corporate mass.
The layers of bureaucracy, complex internal systems, and committees, all the things that slow down large organizations.
And this agility is a massive competitive advantage when the market shifts. Think about Stuart Butterfield, the co-founder of Flickr and Slack. He started 2 online games, Game Never Ending and Glitch. Both failed to find a profitable audience, meaning they were commercial failures.
However, because his teams were small and focused, he was able to pivot hyper-quickly. He identified the most useful key features from the failed games, the photo-sharing capabilities from one, the internal chat and collaboration tools from the other, and spun them off into new, highly successful products.
Flick, and later the billion-dollar company, Slack.
A huge, slow-moving company could never have executed those pivots with that kind of speed. Facing the limitations of time and money forced hyper-focus on what was working.
Danielle Laporte, post-funding trauma, learned this same lesson. Not accepting outside funding allowed her to move faster. She could quickly release a first minimum viable version of a product, using the genuine profit from that release to fund future iterations, keeping costs low and complexity minimal.
So radical simplicity becomes the turbocharger for the CO1. If you set up your company to maximize your ability to solve existing problems and adapt instantly as new ones arise, you gain a speed advantage that your larger, more complex competitors simply cannot match.
If the traits define how a CO1 operates internally, then Section 3 defines its strategic limits. This is where we talk about the dark side of the unlimited growth mandate. The beast, or the hungry ghost.
The hungry ghost, or Prita in Buddhist mythology, is a profound metaphor. It describes a creature with an insatiable appetite, a huge stomach, but a tiny throat. It constantly seeks to consume but can never be satisfied, which leads to perpetual dissatisfaction and misery.
In business, This manifests as the quest for more growth, more profit, more followers, and more validation, none of which ever leads to genuine happiness or operational stability.
Danielle Laporte ran headlong into this beast after taking investor funding. She felt she needed a massive infrastructure to match her vision. So she spent hundreds of thousands building a complex, million-dollar website infrastructure.
The problem? That million-dollar website required a constant, expensive team of technical experts, security specialists, and managers just to maintain and update it.
The beast had an ever-growing appetite for resources, pulling her focus away from her core purpose of writing and teaching. She realized she didn't want the exponential growth required to perpetually feed that massive system.
Her strategy shifted radically. She stopped broadcasting light to everyone and started focusing on existing customers, feeding only those people who show up for dinner. She radically simplified her offering to serve a highly loyal existing base, drastically cutting complexity and overhead.
This beast doesn't just devour small startups, it affects even the largest, most established corporations. The sources provide clear corporate lessons in scaling too fast, leading to brand dilution and financial ruin.
Take Starbucks. Their aggressive, rapid expansion led them to dilute the brand by adding superfluous products like sandwiches, breakfast wraps, and even CVs, trying to capture every possible dollar from every possible customer.
They were trying to be everything to everyone, which inevitably meant they lost focus on their core competency. Simple, high-quality coffee.
This eventually forced them to close over 900 stores globally and perform a painful internal correction to return focus to doing their one thing espresso better. They proved that betterment wasn't always bigger.
Other classic failure of growth illusion is Krispy Kreme. Their hot, freshly baked donuts were a novelty that created huge social currency and massive lines, primarily because they were scarce.
But they aggressively expanded, moving into grocery stores and gas stations.
By making their product ubiquitous and available cold and packaged in every corner store, they diluted the very scarcity signal, the hot now light, that they capitalized on.
Sales dropped dramatically, and their massive complex size led to massive accounting and legal nightmares, including a $75 million SEC settlement due to misleading reports. The size created complexity and risk that ultimately undermined the product's unique value proposition.
And of course, we cannot discuss uncontrolled growth without mentioning Pets.com, the poster child of the 2000s .com bubble.
Overfunded and focused purely on brand presence over profitability.
They famously spent over $17 million on advertising, those famous sock puppet ads shown during the Super Bowl, in a single quarter when their revenue for that same quarter was only $8.8 million.
They were spending based on hoped-for growth that never materialized, resulting in an estimated $300 million loss of investment capital in just 2 years. They were trying to achieve scale before they achieved minimum viable profit.
These examples underscore the strategic need for so-ones to actively set an upper bound to their goals. Most traditional businesses only set a lower bound. I want to make at least $1 million.
A Co-1 strategically asks, I want to make at most $500,000 this year, based on my definition of enough and my desired quality of life.
This simple switch in mindset setting, a limit, is profoundly freeing. Once that self-imposed limit is met, they are released from the pressure to find new ways to sell, allowing them to focus exclusively on quality, betterment, and enjoying their lives rather than constantly scrambling for new revenue streams.
This brings us to a fascinating case study, the Snow Globe Queen. She runs an extremely unscalable business, making highly intricate, unique snow globes one at a time for high-end clientele. Requests poured in from celebrities, corporate offices, and museums. Demand was through the roof.
A traditional business would scream, scale, hire staff, franchise. But think about the logistical nightmare she avoided. Scaling production would mean hiring and training staff for extremely intricate manual labor. It would introduce massive quality control issues, require complex inventory management for hundreds of tiny components, and introduce the expense and headache of managing a physical manufacturing space.
Instead of accepting that complexity, she focused on creating an absolutely exquisite, superior product, better than any mass-produced competition. She charged a massive premium for her unique work.
And then she simply raised her prices higher and higher until demand naturally leveled off to exactly what she, working solo, could comfortably handle. She maximized her profit per unit without increasing her size, complexity, or overhead.
That is the ultimate victory of betterment over size.
It's a perfect counter-narrative to the business world's core assumption. Hall of Fame basketball coach Pat Riley called this phenomenon the disease of more. He noticed that when winning players or teams started achieving success, they would stop focusing on the fundamentals like dedicated practice and focus, and instead get lured into chasing more endorsements, more fame, and more accolades.
They lost their focus on what made them successful in the first place.
Exactly. The pursuit of more destroyed their core competency. Staying small, focused, and excellent is a long-term plan, not just a temporary stepping stone.
Section 4 moves us from internal discipline and strategy to external relationships, emphasizing that the long-term success of a So-One is intrinsically linked to customer success, clear purpose, and authentic personality.
We established earlier that customers don't care if you are profitable. They care deeply if your product or service helps them succeed or become profitable. This realization that making the customer win is the foundation of your business is the cornerstone of a profitable, long-lasting So-One.
And financially, this focus on retention is extremely sensible. Acquiring a new customer costs, on average, 6 to 7% more than retaining an existing one.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It is. Therefore, metrics like loyalty, repeat business, and renewal rates are far more important indicators of a C1's health than mere customer acquisition figures. Loyalty creates the predictable, stable revenue stream crucial for maintaining the runway buffer we'll discuss later.
And what generates that loyalty? It's the small, unexpected touches. Referrals are massive, a staggering 83% of new business comes from word-of-mouth referrals. But you don't get referrals by just meeting the standard expected level of customer service. You have to actively exceed expectations to create evangelists.
Let's look at Sean D'Souza, the marketing expert who strategically caps his business profits at $500,000 a year so he can focus entirely on betterment, not growth. His core customer retention strategy involves sending his long-term customers a $20 box of gourmet chocolates with a handwritten note thanking them for their loyalty.
The chocolate strategy. It's so counterintuitive and brilliant. Customers will spend $2,000 on his comprehensive training program, which is what helps them make money, but they talk about the $20 box of chocolates more than the training itself.
That small, unexpected, personalized attention creates immediate, deep loyalty and reciprocity.
A phenomenal, high-stakes example of this unexpected delight is the Rackspace pizza story. A support representative at the hosting company Rackspace was on the phone with a customer for a long time, working through a technical issue.
Right. And during a brief hold, the rep overheard the customer mention to a coworker that he was extremely hungry and wishing he had ordered dinner.
So the rep, without saying a word, quietly ordered a pizza to be delivered to the customer's address on file. When the pizza arrived, the rep simply told the customer to answer the door.
The customer was completely blown away by this unexpected act of human service. This act of reciprocity, the business solving a non-technical human problem, built tremendous loyalty and was shared thousands of times online. The customer felt compelled to help the business by remaining loyal and becoming a spontaneous evangelist.
It just reinforces the idea that personalization scales better than mass advertising.
Beyond personalized service, companies of one can compete powerfully on values and purpose, not just price or volume. If your purpose resonates, customers will align with you and pay a premium.
A perfect example is Patagonia. Their core purpose centers on environmental stewardship and durable goods. Their ironclad lifetime guarantee and their co-founding of the 1% for the Planet initiative align perfectly with their customers' ethical values.
This deeply entrenched purpose allows them to charge a massive premium price for their clothing and accessories because customers are paying for the values as much as the product itself.
But misalignment can be catastrophic, as we saw in the Daiya revolt. Daiya Foods, a plant-based cheese company, was beloved by vegans and others avoiding dairy, their core, loyal customer base.
Then the growth mandate kicked in. Daiya was sold to the pharmaceutical giant Otsuka, a large Japanese corporation known for testing products on animals.
Loyal vegan customers, who had chosen Daiya specifically because of their values, felt immediately and massively betrayed by this sudden misalignment.
Even though the cheese itself didn't change, customers immediately initiated widespread boycotts and petitions. Retailers felt the pressure and pulled the product. This shows that chasing growth at all costs risks overlooking the fundamental well-being and success of your core customer base, the very group who defined your existence. When values are betrayed, loyalty just evaporates.
This brings us to personality. Personality is the non-replicable asset of a So-One-Up. Your unique style, your humor, your approach to activism, the specific way you find solutions. Since skills and expertise can be copied, your personality is your most impenetrable moat.
The author, an admitted awkward and excitable nerd, realized that once he stopped trying to conform and was okay with sharing his authentic self, his quirks, his passions, his personal stories, people started to respond and trust him because of his personality. It's a shortcut to connection.
This is critical for cutting through the noise. Marie Forleo, who runs an 8-figure training company, uses her quirky, energetic, and authentic self front and center in all her training and marketing. Her audience strongly relates to this specific personality, leading her to be named a leader for the next generation by Oprah herself.
People buy into the vision of the person, not just the product features.
This authenticity often leads to a strategy called polarization. Guy Kawasaki, the marketing expert, believes if you try to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one, resulting in mediocrity, the dreaded vanilla ice cream of entrepreneurship.
Polarization, like Marmite's famous tagline, "You either love it or hate it," forces a quicker binary decision. By being distinctive and taking a stand, you instantly repel the people who would never be great customers, saving you marketing waste. And you create fierce evangelists among the niche who do connect.
This allows the C1, which lacks massive ad budgets, to define a hyper-niche audience and focus all their energy there.
We see this played out in business rivalry too. WestJet, the Canadian airline, used the highly publicized United Airlines incident where a customer was violently dragged off a flight to market themselves. Their campaign was not subtle. They advertised, "We don't overbook," complete with the hashtag owner scare.
Positioning themselves as the moral protagonist against an obvious antagonist. Our brains are wired for remembering good stories and epic struggles, and polarization provides that structure instantly.
That powerful focus on the human side leads us directly into Section 5. The execution. How exactly do we start this C1 journey without falling into the trap of overbuilding? The mandate is to begin with the smallest viable version, aiming for minimum viable profit, or MVPR, right out of the gate.
That acronym, MVPR, is a critical distinction. People tend to focus on the wrong things when starting. Renting fancy office space, seeking massive funding rounds, or building elaborate websites with hundreds of features. They confuse appearing successful with being profitable.
If your idea requires a massive investment of time or money before a single dollar of revenue comes in, you are probably thinking too big too soon.
It's the famous Steve Martin analogy for budding comedians. Don't ask about agents or headshots. Ask, how do I get really, truly good at comedy? For a Say One, the question should be, how do I create the smallest version of this idea that gets me paying customers immediately?
The goal isn't just a viable product, it's a viable profit stream.
Look at Alexandra Franzen. Days after quitting her radio job, she didn't rent an office or spend money on a sophisticated website. She personally emailed 60 contacts, friends, professors, former coworkers, stating clearly and concisely that she was now a freelance writer ready for new projects.
That personal direct outreach led to her securing 3 small paying projects almost instantly. This cash flow and these early referrals just snowballed from there. This approach validated her product and her market while achieving MVPR with zero overhead and minimal risk.
Another brilliant example is Jeff Sheldon, founder of UGMonk, the design-focused clothing company. He didn't try to launch a massive brand. He started with just 4 t-shirt designs and a small $2,000 loan from his father.
He immediately outsourced production to a reputable printer, focusing on a tiny, limited run of only 200 shirts. He was profitable almost instantly after paying back the small loan. He only increased inventory when the tiny runs sold out, iterating and testing demand as he went.
This iterative, profit-based approach meant that while he wasn't initially planning for massive scale, scale happened naturally because he proved the market demand first, entirely funded by profit, not debt. For 2 years, he kept his full-time design job and invested all the profits from UGMonk back into the company until he could pay himself a full-time salary.
This MVPR methodology is profoundly different from the typical startup approach of launching big, spending big, and hoping the market catches up. Instead of trying to protect proprietary ideas, successful Say Ones leverage the power of teaching everything you know.
Sharing expertise freely is a massive trust builder and an excellent lead generation funnel. Customers are far more likely to trust and hire the person who teaches them about an industry, provided that information is useful and accurate. The transparency builds instant authority.
Brian Clark, the founder of Copyblogger, is a prime example of this strategy in action. He quit his law job and, running low on money, started a website sharing free educational information about legal issues and copyright. By freely sharing educational content, he demonstrated his expertise.
People quickly trusted his insights and expertise and realized they wanted to hire him specifically as their lawyer, even though they had access to all his knowledge for free. He proved that the trust built through teaching is infinitely more valuable than hoarding knowledge.
It also highlights the idea that the downside of sharing your non-proprietary ideas is almost nothing. Most ideas are just better executions of existing concepts. Facebook is a better MySpace. Uber and Lyft are convenient taxis. The Suwon shouldn't worry about protecting non-proprietary ideas. They should focus entirely on execution quality.
Because that is the proprietary asset.
The ultimate execution for a Suwon is scaling through automation, not hiring, which is the traditional route that adds complexity, overhead, and liability. Technology today allows a CO1 to scale output dramatically without scaling infrastructure or people.
We see this in the creation process. Companies like Girlfriend Collective, which advocates for slow fashion, don't run their own sweatshops. They outsource physical production of their recycled leggings to high-wage factories in Taiwan, separating their ethical branding and design oversight from the physical, complex manufacturing process.
This ensures high standards without the need for managing a massive factory complex themselves.
And in the connection and support realm, automation is transformative. Instead of hiring 3 customer support reps, companies can use automated email sequences right after purchase trip campaigns to show customers how to use the product best, proactively answering common questions and greatly reducing the number of support requests that ever reach a human.
You scale solutions, not staff. Automation can also cut down on time wasted dealing with tire kickers, leads who are curious but not serious buyers. Jamie Lee Hugendorn, a designer, automated most of her onboarding process using simple scheduling apps like Calendly and email marketing automation.
Automated emails detailed her services, her required prices, and her availability.
This system lets serious clients book meetings only after reviewing the necessary details. She cut the time required to turn a lead into a paying project from 8 to 16 hours down to just 1 hour. She scaled her efficiency and reduced personal labor dramatically without hiring a single assistant.
This all boils down to the final debunking of the hustle myth. There is a toxic idea in entrepreneurship that working for yourself requires pushing yourself to the physical limits every single day, turning sleeplessness and burnout into a badge of honor.
But Wayne Oates' research found that workaholism does not lead to greater financial reward, higher quality output, or greater self-efficacy. The only measurable impact of this constant hustle is higher job stress, greater work-life conflict, and deteriorating physical and mental health.
The core philosophy of the CO1 is that better is better, not simply more hours. A CO1 is built on smarter systems designed to reclaim time and autonomy.
That pursuit of smarter systems leads us naturally into our final strategic phase. Section 6 covers the absolute necessary financial and legal guardrails for autonomy. To operate responsibly and maintain that critical resilience, a CO1 needs to professionalize its structure.
That's right. A key foundational step, often overlooked by solo entrepreneurs, is to set up a separate legal entity, typically a corporation or an LLC. This distinction is crucial because it ensures that the business, not you personally, is liable should anything catastrophic go wrong.
This is what we call piercing the corporate veil. You need that layer of separation between your personal finances and the business's legal risk.
And you must enlist professional help early. A specialized business lawyer should be retained, not necessarily so you can sue everyone, but as a preventative measure. They are essential for drafting sound contracts, clear terms of service, and solid NDAs to keep the threat of being sued and the corresponding stress on your daily operations as small as possible.
Spending money on preventative legal advice saves massive money later. On the financial side, professional accounting is non-negotiable. Sugoan finance can be deceptively complex, dealing with issues like cross-border digital sales, selling services in US dollars while operating in Canadian dollars, or handling quarterly tax estimations.
You need to hire an accountant familiar with your specific business size and industry.
And your accountant shouldn't just be a reactive tax filer, they must be a proactive advisor. They advise on tax strategy, the most efficient financial structure for paying yourself, managing deductions, and responding to any government requests. They are your financial sentinel, ensuring efficiency and compliance, which directly impacts your profit margins.
Next comes financial resilience. Because co-owned income can fluctuate dramatically based on sales cycles or seasonality, a runway buffer of liquid savings is essential. This is generally defined as 3 to 6 months of business and personal expenses set aside for security.
Why 3 to 6 months? Because that range typically covers the length of a slow sales cycle, allowing you to weather a financial downturn without panicking or taking undesirable work. It turns a large client leaving from a crisis into a manageable planning opportunity.
The author, who admits to being cautious, wasn't willing to start working on his own full-time until he had a 6-month runway buffer fully saved up.
Furthermore, C1s lack the employer-provided benefits of a corporate job, so prioritizing long-term retirement savings is a non-negotiable step toward personal security. Passive, diversified investments, specifically low-cost index funds, are often the preferred method because they align with the C1 philosophy. Low expense ratios, passive management, and broad diversification means you spend zero time managing them and maximize long-term gains.
This entire structure, the LLC, the accountant, and the runway buffer, all ties back to the core concept of defining enough. Once you have your structure and your financial security defined, you fundamentally remove the constant crushing pressure of scaling to meet external demands.
And that, ultimately, is the highest form of freedom and choice. When you remove the pressure of constant scaling, you're presented with genuine choices. You can choose to take on more work and make more money, or you can choose to prioritize life.
Spending more time with family, traveling, experimenting with nonprofit ideas, or just rocking climbing in August. You gain the ultimate freedom to define how you spend your time and energy.
It's the pursuit of longevity and simple, enduring stability over risky, meteoric, and often fragile growth. And for the perfect, enduring example of this philosophy, we turn to the mountains of Japan.
The Nishiyama Onsen Kyumkin Hotel, nestled deep in Japan's Yamanashi Prefecture, is not just old, it is the oldest continuously run hotel in the world. It opened its doors in AD 705 and has been managed by 52 successive generations of the same family for over 1,300 years.
Empires have risen and fallen, governments have changed, and global markets have collapsed and reformed, but this small establishment has endured, remaining profitable enough to stay open.
It only has 35 rooms and focuses solely on providing simple, excellent customer service. Natural hot spring baths open 20/47 and simple seasonal food sourced locally. There's no Wi-Fi, no massive expansion, and no pressure to become a global chain.
Its survival is a testament to the fact that focusing on simple excellence and continuous betterment, improving the experience without increasing the size, is a superior model for long-term sustainability than growth for growth's sake. It proves, unequivocally, that small can be a long-term winning strategy, not just a stepping stone.
That provides a powerful final synthesis of the entire concept. Success for a company of one is defined internally, centered on building resilience through acceptance of reality, achieving autonomy through skill mastery, and creating scalable systems that serve a defined, loyal customer base. The ultimate freedom gain is the choice over how you spend your time and energy, prioritizing fulfillment over complexity.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget, at Core Concept HQ, we simplify powerful ideas to help you live smarter. See you in the next summary.